Hey everybody, Adam here with Hometown Acres. Welcome back. We just got back from the Paul Bunyan show. I got Matt here from Firewood Guy. I finally convinced him to go with me to the show this year after being there for 3 years. And then we've got Mark from Eastonmade Wood Splitters here as well. And Matt being at the show was the first time you actually got a chance to see the Eastonmade products in person, right?
I did, and I got to watch one run on just a couple logs, and it was impressive to see it run.
And we've got a demo day scheduled here for you in your wood yard because, you know, when you see these machines at the show, they run one log every half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. You don't get to see them continually run.
Spaces, exactly. So
Yeah.
we're going to be able to do that here for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what this thing looks like in a real world setup. And also at firewood shows, they bring you telephone poles, right? So we actually have, log truck loads of logs that you routinely get in. So it'll be nice to see a real world test to see what this stuff looks like.
Yeah, and I snuck a kind of crooked one. It's still on the truck. It's going to go on there. We're going to see how it does. But we're going to start with the easy stuff first and then run a little nastier stuff and see what it looks like.
So if you guys haven't seen the previous videos we've done with Matt is, you know, if I'm the weekend warrior firewood guy, Matt is the full-blown, you're in it in the weeds, right? You do 1,000 cords a year. You've got multiple trucks, semi-trucks, hook lift trucks, dump trailers, all that stuff. I mean, you are full-blown into the firewood business here, and you already have a firewood processor, right? So
I do.
Why are you looking at, is this going to replace your old processor, or are you adding to it?
No, we're planning to add to it. We're growing into the packaged firewood business, and resplitting plagues everybody in that business. And we're thinking that this machine, we want to see if this machine can solve that problem. I have high hopes. I have reservations, but we'll see. We've tried a lot of different things. We've done the Penosa. That helps a lot. We've got this machine here just to see how that 16-way wedge does. When I first saw it on the video, I thought, finally, somebody's made a progressive style, like everybody calls it a French fry cutter. But this one looks like it'll actually make nice wood and not get jammed up and plugged up. So we'll just see how that goes.
And we were talking about, you know, in terms of how large Matt's firewood business is here, you actually just won a national retail.
It's a national retailer that sells packaged firewood.
Yes, and you're going to be the supplier for that national retailer for bundled firewood.
Correct.
So that's, I guess, probably the main reason for this, right, is growing that business. And
yeah, and as we started in the firewood business, it was enough to have a processor run a couple days a week. And as we get bigger and more demand, that processor has to run more and more. It takes more labor from other things that we have going on. So we're thinking if we can put a machine in the yard, cuts a log, puts it through one stroke, I've got one guy, frees up another couple guys to go do other stuff.
yeah.
It should really allow him to scale his business to a different level. And I guess after today, we'll find out if he agrees with that or not.
Right.
So anyway, this really is going to be a relationship between these two today. I'm just here because if they're doing a demo day, I wanted to follow along and see from the perspective of somebody who's buying a machine this size, because let's be honest, with what I'm doing, this machine is way overkill for anything I would be doing. But somebody who's interested in buying it and somebody who's selling it, I kind of want to see the interaction between these two here today. And I also want to see this thing run for more than just a log at a time. So without further ado, I think, Mark, you're going to give Matt a walk around here.
We're going to walk around the machine a little bit, talk about the equipment, and then we're going to spend some time in the cab showing them how to run the machine.
Yep.
And then we're going to let them cut some wood.
And I'd imagine there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve.
For sure, yeah. Like it usually takes, you know, operators anywhere from a few days to a week to kind of get comfortable with operating the machine and really take it to its potential.
Yeah. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and get started.
So in terms of the conveyors, right now we're using one of your stackers, but normally in terms of the conveyor options that we have, we do a 16-foot foldable attachable, which is really good for customers that want to do mobile or moving their equipment on a regular basis. Then in terms of standalone conveyors, we have 16, 24, 32, and 40-foot conveyors. Wow. And it just depends on how you want to configure your operation. And do you want to clean your wood and then take it into your kiln drying operation, or do you let it age and then dry it? It just depends on how you're configuring. In terms of the wedge that we have in the machine today, we're running a 16-way box wedge, which will produce square pieces. It's optimized to produce pieces that are 3.5 by 3.5, And then obviously it's dependent on the diameter of the log, but if you get kind of wood between 14 and 18 inches going through it, you should end up with really nice size package wood that that should minimize your resplit requirements. In terms of the splitter chamber, we've got a set of rollers there on the bottom that allow you for repositioning the block. They go forward and reverse. We'll cover that when we go into the cab. And so that minimizes the amount of times you actually got to reach out with a log pick to straighten the block out. We've got a drop down door, which allows you to cut out big crotches in a log, especially when you're doing packaged wood. It doesn't tend to give you a nice product, and so a lot of customers will drop those sections out, short pieces in terms of cookies. And then the other nice feature some customers use this for is they'll run logs and cut it down for their kindling machine. So they'll run 10 or 12 inch blocks. We've done setups here where we put a side conveyor and they're loading that into a bin or a container, and they're taking that over to their kindling machine. The blue table that you see there, that's to help with the last 3 feet of the log. It tilts up so that it stops the log from wanting to tilt into the cutting chamber.
And
and then,
not to cut you off
Yeah,
there, but
of course.
something that Andrew went over at the show, if you run a firewood processor and you run pole length wood, you get down to the last piece, and you can't hang 16 inches out this side, still clamp and saw your cookie off.
That's correct.
So you've got to figure out your length from the back to the front, so you're just cutting off your 4 or 6 inch piece. And I think Andrew told me that each one of these feet represent a certain distance to the saw.
That's correct. So I was on my way there.
Oh, sorry.
So in terms of when you bring the log in, we have a positive stop. So when you activate the infeed in terms of the log, bringing it forward, that stop comes out 4 inches, waits for your log to be dead stopped against it, and then when it senses pressure on that clamp, it backs away 4 inches and gets out of the way of the cutting chamber. And then in terms of the clamp, if you look at it, there's 3 sets of teeth. If you line up the butt end of the log on the very outside of that clamp, you're at 16 inches. Center line is 14, and then the very last set of teeth is 12 inches from the blade to the butt end of the log. So it helps you figure out how to maintain that positive 16 inches on the very last piece.
Yeah, that's a big deal. The person that designed that has obviously cut wood on a processor before.
A little, for sure. The other thing that's unique on this machine is we opened up the trough. You'll see a lot of older processors out there have a U-shaped trough, and so they're prone to getting plugged, and if a piece of wood turns sideways, to jam up the trough. So in this case, we've got enough expansion on both sides that if a piece of wood turns, 16-inch piece of wood turns, when you push the next one through, you typically clear that. And then the trough itself has an angle here so that all the debris that comes from splitting kind of falls out of the splitter wedge and doesn't cause the chamber to plug up. And this is on 10-pound axles, 10,000-pound axles, and this machine, the 48C, comes in just shy of 18,000 pounds. We're running a standard 8-foot wide deck on here with 4 legs. The legs are set up so that you can kind of handle different length of wood. So the first spacing is 4 feet, 8 feet, and then 16 feet. And the overall trough is just shy of 20 feet in length, which means that if you put the butt end of a long log here, you can go up to 30 feet in length.
That's incredible.
We're running Cat engines, 115 horsepower Cat engine on this unit. And then in terms of the pumps, we're running 2 piston pumps. The big advantage of piston pumps is we get higher pressure at the same RPM, and because they only produce pressure on demand for the system, or our hydraulic system tends to run cooler than traditional gear pumps. For high pressure filtration on the backside there, 160-gallon hydraulic tank, in-tank filter on the return line, and there's a valve back here, and that's to do the preheat in the morning. So in the morning when you start up the machine, there's temperature indicators in terms of the hydraulic fluid in the cab. We ask you to open that valve and circulate the oil between the tank and the pumps to do a preheat cycle, get your hydraulic oil up to temperature. In terms of all the hydraulic valves on this machine, they're all under this blue cover. So there's no hydraulics in or near the cab, so none of that heat is impacting the operator. And then in terms of accessing them, you pop that cover off and you can easily access and do maintenance on them. The saw head is mounted on a heavy-duty 3x6 1/4-inch wall tubing, heavy plate, oversized pillow blocks, pretty robust system in terms of durability and longevity. Just watch yourself when you come through here. And then the next part is, I guess before we hop in the cab, we've got a combo heat and cooling unit mounted on the top of the cab. Compressor is driven hydraulically here below the cab, and so we're just running cooled lines from the top to the bottom of the cab. And then obviously when you want heat, we turn those valves on, and we're drawing radiator fluid in for the heating system. On the back side of the machine here, we've got 2 sets of hydraulic auxiliaries, and that's typically for your outfeed conveyor, cleaner, and then being able to adjust them vertically. So one is running your conveyor and your cleaner in terms of they're connected in line or in series, and then the other one is for vertical adjustment.
Gotcha.
Any questions on any of that we've covered?
Well, something I don't think that the video does justice, because I've seen videos on this before, is just the size of the steel and the size of the pump. The hydraulic pump is massive.
The 2 piston pumps they're sized to run this unit, plus the auxiliary functions we have, and they're sized to be able to do that on a continuous basis for large commercial operators that are running this equipment 40 or 50 or more hours a week.
And how many horsepower is the motor?
The engine is a 115 horsepower Caterpillar engine.
Okay. And that was one of the things that I got really attracted to when I saw it at the show. I walked up before I ever talked to anybody, and I looked under the cover and I saw yellow paint, and I was immediately excited, because you know when you buy a Cat, you have service and you have parts. Yeah. And that's always important.
And it's funny because when we originally, when Andrew bought Bell's, he decided he already had a relationship with Kubota, and he was putting Kubota engines on there. But unfortunately, the support, the after-sales support, we struggle a little bit with in terms of their industrial dealer network. And so he put a poll out there asking our customers what their preference was, and the overwhelming majority told us that they would prefer Caterpillar, and that's where we went, even though that wasn't necessarily the most cheapest option in terms of buying engines. You know, you're paying a premium for that network and service.
Absolutely.
So the next stage is really hopping in the cab and reviewing the functions and start running the machine.
Nice.
What I'm going to cover now is kind of the setup functions of the machine and then the operation functions. So in terms of running the machine, everything that you need to actually run the machine is in the joystick.
Okay.
And so there's diagrams here to help you reference as you're learning how to run the equipment. So you'll see the one here for joystick. So it kind of tells you what functions are in the joystick, the left toggle, the right toggle, and then the trigger for the splitter. And I'll go through that in more details here in a minute. We'll start with the setup function. So typically when you come into the machine, the first thing you want to do is turn on the diesel engine, start the preheat cycle. And then after that, you would go to your setup function. So each one of these buttons are referenced here along the bottom on the left-hand side. So your forward and reverse in terms of your conveyor operation. Controlling your speed up and down is your second button. And then the third button is positioning your conveyor vertically up and down. The fourth function is for folding the deck into the frame, okay, or dropping it down on the ground if you were moving it around or had to do a cleanup. Customers will fold it up, do their cleanup, and then drop it back down on the ground. And then from there you move on to the exterior lights. There's exterior lights mounted on the outside of the cab so that if you're running at nighttime you can see what you're cutting and you can see what's going out of the back of the machine.
Yeah.
The next button is just a display button, and that's the one that tells you the hydraulic oil temperature. So in the morning when you get here, this button will typically be blue. We'll ask you to do a preheat cycle by opening that bypass valve that we talked about earlier. It usually takes 10 or 15 minutes. and you'll get a green light. When you have a green light, that's green, mean you're ready to start cutting and producing. So then you hop out, close that valve, and start running. You can turn up your RPMs in terms of your engine controller up here. The next two last buttons, the first one is to activate the saw rotation or stop the saw rotation. The second button allows you to determine the retract distance on the saw head. So in this case, we're fully retracted, fully open on the clamp, but if you're running 10-inch blocks and you want to retract to 15 inches to clear the log as you infeed, what it does is it shortens your cycle in terms of retract distance, and the other advantage is that it quiets the machine down because you're not throwing that big arm around.
Right.
So it just makes the operation of the equipment a lot smoother. So now back to the joystick. Well, there's a joystick and two toggles there. So if you grab onto that joystick and pull it towards you, you're actually infeeding the log down through the trough. And if you push it in the opposite direction, you're moving that log out.
Way. Yeah.
And why would you want to move a log out? Well, you might have a log that you don't like for some reason. You could actually push it right off the end of the machine if you wanted to do that. Or if you had a small section that was all rotten and you didn't want to bother cutting it, you could feed it out the end of the machine. Then the left toggle operates so left to right is operating your infeed deck that loads the logs into the trough.
Gotcha.
So left and right as you see it in front of you. So if you're activating left, you're moving a log in. If you activate right, you're moving a log, or you're moving your log deck back. Why would you be doing that? I don't know if you noticed when you were loading, some of your logs had spacing between them. So I moved them all out to the end of the deck to stack them so that you had more room to put more logs on.
Yeah.
And so that's typically some of the stuff that I cover when we're doing training. The dump table is that tilt table that we talked about earlier for cutting the last 3 feet of the log so that it doesn't tip into the cutting or the splitter. And so it's just up or down as you would see the table in front of you.
Gotcha.
The right-hand toggle activates, so that has 8 functions on it. The 4 that you use are in blue here, just like the one on the left. So if you wanted to position the wedge up or down in terms of centering your wedge with the block that you're cutting, you would push that toggle up or down depending on the position of the wedge. Then the left to right is the rollers in the bottom that we talked about earlier in terms of helping you reposition a block. Sometimes you'll have a block that drops in and it's off center to your wedge. Those rollers help you recenter or straighten out a piece.
Okay.
In terms of the other functions, they're not as common. So if you push and hold your trigger up and then activate the up and down, that allows you to operate the splitter manually. And these are fully proportional. And as we start the training here afterwards, we're going to run through these in terms of dry cycle so you can get a feel how proportional they are. Why would you want to operate this splitter manually? It's really useful if you have to clear a jam in your equipment, because you can take smaller pieces and start clearing a jam strategically, or if you just want to clear out your wedge because you're swapping it out.
Right.
And so then the other function is the left to right, and the left to right actually allows you to open that side door. So again, you push the trigger up and hold, and then activate to the right, you're dropping down your door, activate to the left, you're closing your door.
Now, should that be, if you're going to eject a piece, should that be open before you cut it off?
Ideally, if you know you're sending a cookie or something out, then you would want to open that door. But if you forget, you can still open it afterwards and use the rollers to help you
kick it out.
Evacuate it.
Okay.
And then the last function on here is the e-stop. The e-stop kills all of these controls except the engine. It's a diesel engine, so if you're running full RPM, we don't want to just kill that engine. We want you to idle the engine down, let it cool for 3 to 5 minutes, and then turn it off.
Right.
Any questions on what we've covered so far?
I'm a learn on the fly kind
There
of guy.
you go.
So.
Well, we're going to run this thing in a minute. Last few things I want to point out is you've got a USB port here, phone holder, coffee cup holder, and then above you have the hot and cold in terms of either heating or AC unit.
Creature comforts.
Yep, exactly. So on that note, we're going to go ahead and so if you want to turn the key on, let let it cycle through. The glow plug light will, and you're good to go. Turn her over. So when you start the machine, its idle speed is about 950 RPMs, and then to bring it up to operating speed, you press and hold the idle up button until you get to 2200 RPM, and you're at max RPM. And so really we have running RPM at 2200 and idle at 950.
Okay.
So we're going to leave it in idle, and we're going to play around with some of these functions. Unfortunately, we don't have a external conveyor hooked up, so we're not going to be playing with those. Our deck's already down. So the two that we're going to use here is turning on the saw and teaching the saw. I don't normally get into teaching the saw at the very beginning. I want you to kind of get used to running the machine, and then a little later during the day we'll start to use that function.
Okay.
Because if you think about the saw, if it's only retracting half a distance, it's impairing your visibility a little bit. And so I just want you to kind of get used to where everything is in terms of the machine. So if you go ahead and grab the joystick and pull it towards you, you're going to activate your in-feed tray.
Okay.
And then the faster you move it, or the more aggressively you pull it back, so it's fully proportional.
Yeah.
So you can really finesse what you want, or you can kind of go full speed.
Gotcha.
Go ahead and activate the saw arm down, and what you'll notice is that the clamp comes down first to clamp the log, and if you continue tilting, the saw arm comes all the way down. And then if you go in the opposite direction, then the saw head comes up, and then the clamp will release and retract.
Gotcha.
So now we try the left toggle, up and down, activates your table.
Oh, wow.
And again, that's proportional. And the more time you spend in the seat,
You get a
the
better
more
feel for
feel you'll get for it, exactly. And then if you, we won't do it at this point, if you do left to right, it moves your deck. You can go ahead and inch it if you want, just to kind of get a feel for it.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
And
this is
and
the
then
rollers.
the outside toggle is the rollers, up and down on the wedge. Go ahead and fully extend it or drop it. And what you have there is about 10 inches of travel on that wedge.
Okay.
And so it really allows you to pick up that middle blade or knife and center it with your block. Exactly.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Now if you want to go ahead and press and hold your trigger up and activate your side to side, that'll open your side door.
Nice.
Now if you go trigger hold up and activate your splitter manually by dropping it, you're bringing it in, and feel how slow you can operate that. So you can do that safely if you have an operator out there helping you clear in a jam. You don't have to ram anything in at full speed.
You can come in nice and easy.
Exactly.
Yep.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to rev up RPMs so that you can see the splitter operate correctly. So at 2200, we're back up to RPM. So go ahead and pull the trigger one pull. That activates a full auto cycle down and back.
Okay.
Now go ahead and pull it again, and then midway down just pull it one more time.
Okay.
It sends it back to home. Now if you activate and pull two hits on the trigger quickly, it's going to stop where you do that. Go ahead and give it a try. So if you want to stop it because something's gone sideways, you can either return it to home or stop it where
you're at. Gotcha. That's incredible.
And those are all the functions
Yeah.
that we cover on the initial training. One thing I didn't cover when we were out there is the dead stop right now is set up for producing 16-inch wood. If you wanted to do shorter wood, you would back off the jam nut here and then put a impact and either make your adjustments in or out, and you have proportional adjustment from 10 to 20 inches.
Gotcha. Wow.
So we're ready to cut our first log. So at this point, what I like to do is just have you inch up a log to the stars that are on. You see there's stars. It's going to pick up that log and throw it in, and then once it throws it over, I recommend you kind of throw it into the reverse so that you don't throw two logs in.
Gotcha.
Or you do it slowly.
Yeah.
There you go. So now you're good to activate your in-feed. There you go. So at this point I would press and hold this button until you get a green light. And now we'll wait a few seconds to get the saw RPM up. You can tell by the sound of it. We're at full RPM on that saw head now. So now clamp your log and make your first cut. Now you want to retract until that clamp releases. Right there, that's sufficient. Are you happy with the position of your knives? That middle knife to your block.
I think it's pretty good.
Push her through. Now you can see what's coming out the back end.
Yeah.
That's a nice thing about this cab is you can see what you're cutting, you can see your block falling in, and you can most importantly see what's coming out the backside.
Yeah. The visibility is a lot better than I thought it would be.
Do we want to turn on the conveyor before we process any more wood, or do you want to drop a few more?
Yeah, we'll throw the conveyor on.
Tell you what, there's very little chaff on that block right there.
Yeah.
There's none.
None. As soon as I pushed that piece of wood through that splitter, I was like, sold.
Okay, we're packing up.
All right, so this is how much wood Matt got done on the 37, or no, I'm used to saying the 37D.
37D.
On the 48C in an hour. And again, he's a beginning operator, so you know, somebody that's been running it for a while will get a lot more done. But what we're doing now is, you might be saying, why didn't you just have the conveyor run right into these metal cages? These are what goes into his kiln. And the reason we're just stacking them in now is we want to see how much trash is left behind. How much good firewood do you yield out of one of these bins, and how much trash is left behind?
I have to say the wood's not like, it's clean split. It's not a lot of, you know, being chewed.
Yeah.
Like this piece here.
Yeah, you still get some of that.
Still pretty clean.
What do you think about size though? I mean, like this one here is probably a little bit big.
Yeah, that one would have been on the top of the wedge, got through there, might need resplit.
But for the most part, I mean, a lot of them are pretty good to go.
So what we want to figure out is how much loss do we have with a wedge like that, and does the loss make up for the efficiency of the machine?
All right, so Matt and I were joking around that as soon as he put that first piece of wood through that 12-way wedge, he said sold. And that's the emotional part of buying a piece of equipment. Then you kind of settle down and start thinking about it, and this is the accounting part of it. And I know I did the exact same thing when I first got the 37D, trying to pick between the 6-way wedge and the box wedge. I measured how much good firewood was I going to get out of a cord, how much kindling was I going to get out of a cord, and how much waste are you going to get out of a cord. And Matt did the math here. What'd you find out?
Yeah, so I've got a cord of good packageable firewood. I've got 8 cubic feet of kindling, and I've got about a 1/4 yard, maybe a little more, about a 1/4 yard of just what would go into our mulching operation or waste.
Yeah, not going to be good for burning for anything.
Right. And if your wood is free and you're not paying anything to have it brought in, then this is all kind of a moot point.
Right.
But when you're paying, you know, $1,000 for a load of logs, you've got to quantify how much of that you're giving up when you get the productivity pickup of an Eastonmade 48C.
Yeah, because honestly, you could get something like a vertical splitter, like an Eastonmade Axis, and eliminate all of this virtually. You'll still have a very small amount, but your input costs are going to be through the roof, because you're going to increase your labor costs so much by running a single wedge knife on a splitter to eliminate this little amount of kindling and chaff. Now, as far as the splits that you got out of there, I think we mentioned because we touched every single one of these pieces, there was only a handful that we would have said needed resplit. For the most part, everything is sized exactly how you want to sell it.
Yeah, less than 6 pieces out of a cord would need to be touched again to be resplit to be packaged. That's totally acceptable.
Yeah.
And you know, these little numbers here, they might seem inconsequential, but when you start doing things at scale, high production, that's the little numbers that'll kill you. It's not the big ones. It's those little details is where you lose, and then you get to the end of the year and you're like, why don't I have any money?
Yeah,
and
I should be making this much per cord, and
right.
it's just disappearing in this.
Right, and unless you do tests like this, you just have hypothesis. You don't know. You're just guessing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you multiply a 1/4 yard out times 1,000 cords that you do a year,
right,
it's a big number.
Right, and when we're gonna bring you back for the spreadsheet breakdown on the machine cost, its lifespan, and how I would look at whether to buy this machine or not for my operation, these are some of the assumptions that you want to narrow down as much as you can, so that the assumptions you do have to make don't play as big of a role.
So anyway, I thought it was important to show you, you know, good material, kindling, and waste off of that machine, because without that information, it's just hey, this process is pretty cool, right? So I think this is valuable to show in amongst the rest of the content we made on that processor today.
Absolutely.
All right, so we got her all packed up. I want to thank you, Mark, for coming out here and
Thank
doing
you.
this. Thank
you,
Eastonmade.
Thank you.
I'm pretty excited. I mean, I've got no business ever owning a piece of machinery like this, but I'm excited to be included in the process of you looking at one, potentially buying one. So what do you think?
I'm impressed. I've always been amazed by the circle saw processors for how fast they cut. Never was a big fan of a box wedge. This one's probably the best thing I've seen. And we've got some more testing to do. It's not just about the price of the machine, it's about what our yield is on the wood coming out. Today's process wasn't about like verifying a production rate, because it's not purely about cords per hour. You can see that if you can put 16 pieces of wood out in one stroke, you're going to make a lot of wood fast.
Yeah.
And today was my first day operating this machine. It's very intuitive. Everything's on one hand, and I wasn't cutting and splitting at the same time, which is obviously an efficiency pickup and productivity. Eventually we'd get there once we're warmed up.
A couple more days of sitting in the seat makes a big difference.
Yeah. And when I've got to be honest, every time I've watched one of these processors, I see the log roller and I say, oh, that's a great idea. How does it work in practice? Or I see the cab and I'm immediately turned off, not for the fact that it's comfortable, but for the fact that it interferes with your ability to do the job. And so I've always stayed away from a cab machine for that reason. And so when I was at the show, I watched Andrew run this machine, and we ran one log and he had to reach out with a hooker room and straighten the log, and I thought, well, there we go. There's all that efficiency you've lost. And today we ran a deck load and then a crooked cherry, which it ran it exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And I only had to stick that thing out the window twice.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a lot better than I had anticipated. And that's usually how I approach things. I try to set expectations pretty low, and then I'm always like, I'm happy at the end of it. So this machine definitely, I mean, if the numbers work and it makes sense and it does what we need it to do.
And I think we're going to do a video coming up here going over exactly that. How do you justify a piece of equipment like this? I mean, this is a major investment into the business. How do you analyze that and come to a conclusion of, yes, this makes sense for the business, or no, it doesn't? So.
Yeah, so we'll expound on that in a follow-up video. We'll get Mark to get us a quote on this machine as it is today, and we'll kind of break down the numbers and kind of walk you through some of my decision making and why I decide to go one way or the other, or how I break down costs. And it's not purely numbers on a spreadsheet, black and white. Adam and I were talking. There is a little emotional factor that plays into whether you buy a piece of equipment or not.
Little gut feeling.
Little gut feeling, because you can't quantify everything about a machine. It's impossible.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that's going to about wrap this one up. This is the Eastonmade 48C. Did you have something to add, Mark?
No, I just want to thank you for the day, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I really the demo and getting set up. And
really appreciate you guys bringing it in and showing me what it can do.
Yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, give me a big thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Perfect. My wife was calling me the whole time we were doing that. I got to call her back.